my whole job has been, let's demystify the law. And I says, now after 30-something years, I can demystify the law. There's not much that I can't just break down and say, this is what it just truly means.
This is the Startup Junkies podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. My name is Daniel Koonce, and I'm joined here today by my co-host, Mr. Caleb Talley. Caleb, how are we doing today?
Beautiful day in Northwest Arkansas.
Finally got some sun.
Finally, a beautiful day in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, we're glad to have some nice weather finally. We are joined today by our new friend, Mr. Phil Pesek. He's the founder of the law office of Philip A. Pesek. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So the way we kind of like to start these shows off, if you had a X-Men Marvel origin story, if someone's writing a comic book about you, tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh my gosh, that is a curveball, but if you get back to entrepreneur projects and stories, mine's actually a very recent one. I actually, as a lawyer, did the traditional route. I went to law school at ULR in Little Rock, and then I was lucky to get hired by Mitchell Williams in the beginning of my third year. So that was wonderful. I really thought I was going to be an attorney for Mitchell Williams forever. And that didn't happen. And so it was actually the best thing that could have happened to me, because once I did that, I decided, hey, let's go in-house. And so I went to Dillard Department Stores, who was looking for assistant general counsel. And the rest is history. I got into the in-house. And the difference between in-house and the traditional attorney that you talk about is we're inside and we're vested in the business. You can't survive unless you know the business and know how it works first. Then you can help them with their legal stuff. And that's the trouble with the outside counsel, is they don't quite know how to deal with their clients because they don't know how it works. So I had that advantage. And so it was great. And so I worked with Dillard's, and then Dillard's turned into Walmart. Walmart came and recruited me away. And then after that, I did international law. So I was traveling all over the world doing acquisitions. It's crazy. I lived on a plane. And then I went over to Home Depot to do the same thing. Then I came back and did the short, it was time for me to be a general counsel, which is the head of the legal department. And so I came actually back to Arkansas. I worked for a family company down in El Dorado, and then Deltic Timber, which you know owns Chenal down in Little Rock. And so I did that. And then actually I got a little frustrated with all that, and I ended the best job of my life is I went up to Spokane, Washington, of all places, working for a Canadian mining company.
Wow.
And I was traveling to north of the Arctic Circle to a mine up there where you had to go, if you went, you had to stay for several days.
Wow.
And so I did that, and that's the company I retired from. And so, again, what's your expectation of retirement? You think you're going to be playing golf and doing all these hobbies and stuff. Well, I retired like 2 months before COVID hit. And so once I did that, I became bored really quickly. So I started doing some ad hoc work. And so I was doing a lot of contracts and things like that. And that was okay. But then that's when I saw Cynthia Nance, the dean of the the University of Arkansas Law School. And I said, I've got this idea. I says, when I was in law school, I didn't know how to do contracts. They had a contracts class, but it was what is not a contract versus what is a contract. I says, I would love to teach a contract negotiation drafting class. She loved the idea. And so, I wanted to give back, is just, I need to teach these lawyers what I spent 30-something years learning, and that's how to do contracts. So I started that. Boy, I should have been a law school professor. I should have been. I love being in front of the classroom. I love teaching. And it was wonderful. So that got me to kind of thinking about other opportunities. Again, I told you guys I got involved in the Entrepreneur Law Project on contracts. But finally, I had this concept when I retired of being what they call now as a fractional general counsel. And a fractional general counsel it's really, most small companies can't afford to go hire some legal department or some lawyer for their department. And so you guys know, I didn't even know what the word fractional meant for the longest.
Right.
But now is somebody like me can go and offer my general counsel services for small companies that can get me in just bits and parts, from time to time. So I did that. And And that's been very interesting. But a sideline that came out of that was most of the companies I worked for, either they had terrible contracts that needed to be revised, which I did. But the other thing was their business organization was horrible. They were doing a limited liability company or an S Corp, and there's all sorts of stuff on the internet about it, but they were not compliant. And by the way, second class I teach at the law school is compliance. And so I was doing this and found out they don't know what they're doing, and they're just asking for an audit, a lot of traps that a small business could get into. And so I started speaking to different groups, and I've been trying to kind of increase my web, and that's when I found you guys.
Yeah, sounds like quite the journey. It seems like you've been here, there, a little bit of everywhere.
I've heard of some of those companies.
No, exactly. And there's a lot of, here's an interesting kind of factoid, and this is only me on the subject, is the number one business entity out there, as you would probably guess if you said, what would that be? It'd be a limited liability company. The number of the limited liability companies, the number one thing is what we call an S corporation, which is nothing more than a tax filing that you do to avoid self-employment taxes. The problem is they're letting the tail wag the dog there, because a lot of times they may not need to be an S corporation, or they have income that's not subject to self-employment. So the trouble is when you take that leap from a limited liability company to an S corp, all of a sudden compliance goes way, way up and the expenses go way, way up. And sometimes I said, why did you do that? And so what it really showed me was, and why I'm really very happy about this, is there's a void in Northwest Arkansas of somebody to teach people what's what. And that's why I'm so excited doing this. I've just had a blast because it's just something I know very, very well. And there's people in absolute dire need for that kind of information.
And I would say the majority of folks who come into Startup Junkie for consulting, the vast majority are at idea stage because, we're a no-cost resource to the community. And I would say the vast majority of those folks don't know what they don't know. And it's, that's kind of where we hope to come in that process and kind of ask pointed questions to kind of get them going that direction. But they need that in a legal sense, very much so too, obviously.
No, you're exactly right. And the thing about what I try to do too is I have a questionnaire is before what I do with every client is we will have a meeting at absolutely no cost to them. Because what I want to do, a couple of things. One is I want to find out what's on your mind. Like you say, the ideas. I want to do this. It's funny, every time somebody comes to my house, there was electricians in there yesterday, and he goes, I may need to see you. I'm thinking about starting up my own electrical company. It's everywhere. I've got the guy that did my Christmas lights as a client. I have my dentist as a client because they all do the same thing. But then I ask them the questions, and then I say, here's what I think you might want to do with regard to a business organization. But what's nice is there's no pressure on them. They're not paying for a thing. And I'm saying, here's what, if you want to go forward, here's what it is. And then if you need to do it, come to me. And please stay off the internet because forming an LLC on the internet could be very cheap, but you get what you pay for it.
And I feel like when you are, when you love what you do and you're passionate about that and passionate about kind of sharing this information with people who need to hear it, you do kind of almost evangelize your electrician and your Christmas light guy and things like that, because I find myself in like talking about Startup Junkie to Uber drivers and things like that all the time. So what do you do? Well, actually.
And I think everyone I've talked to, my wife is getting really tired of it. And because all of a sudden I'll be talking to somebody and then all of a sudden I'm in this link. She goes, oh my gosh, he's talking to them about limited liability companies. But I do, because it's everybody. Everybody's interested, like is interested, whether it's a side hustle or a way out of the drudgery of a job that they have, is I've dreamed of having a small company my entire legal career, and it had nothing to do with the law. But I was too scared to do it. And I didn't have places like Startup Junkie to come to and express, here's kind of my idea, what do you think? I had nothing like that when I looked at it.
I think that's so common, especially among our, first-time clients and stuff too. I think people just want a little bit of agency, in their life with that.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of the companies we work with, a lot of people, they're kind of in that idea stage. They're just getting going. Is there such thing as too early when it comes to like looking for legal guidance?
It could be. Of course, as you know, early on, you got to have the money to spend. But what I can do is I say, like, I have a flat fee. I says, I'll create your LLC for $1,200. You think, that's a lot of money for an LLC. I says, well, you're getting more than just an LLC. You're getting an LLC, and then I build them a compliance program. So my binder I give them, it's got the formation documents, but what it does, it has a compliance checklist. And it goes over all the things that they're going to need to have that company, including having meetings, minutes, things like that. The other thing they have is they're buying a lawyer. Because one thing I do is all of a sudden I'm a phone call away. And I'm not the type of attorney that every time you call me, I'm ticking down the time and trying to charge you. Is I want to gain their confidence and their trust that I'm their legal advisor. And they like that.
It's a relationship.
It is a relationship. And I've always been that way. Later, you can talk about billing, but I would rather not charge a client than to have a client think that I took them for too much money. That's just horrible to me to even think about. And I'd rather not charge them than to have that. I don't want a customer or a client that goes away thinking that, Phil took me for, no. That's why the one thing I'd always advise new people is say, if you want to use your local attorney, get a good idea of what it's going to cost you, because don't be afraid to say, how much is this going to cost me? And stuff like that. Understand the billing mechanism. I always, when I was at Mitchell Williams, I just never wanted a client to come to me and say, I'm upset about your bill. Now, I was upset with many a bill because I had, in-house, I always had to look at the outside counsel's bills, and my blood pressure would go up every time. I
think and when you kind of wade into those kind of unknowns for a founder who's not kind of engaged with an attorney yet, things like that, you don't know what you don't know, like we were saying earlier too, but you also don't know what you're getting for said dollar,
Right.
And then to your point of them being upset with the bill, that means that in their mind, they haven't received the value out of that relationship.
Exactly.
When they saw that bill.
And that's why I tell you what, I love it. And I've got one coming up tomorrow, I think it is, when I meet them, because the flat fee includes all the meetings, so I meet them like at Heroes Coffee or somewhere, because I work from my house, and I come in with that binder. and I go through the binder with them and all that. I've yet to have a client go away without a smile on their face.
Right.
Because they, like you say, they see the value for the money that, yes, I spent this $1,200, but I got everything I need. And what's nice is they just add to it as they go. So if anything happened, if somebody was trying to say, we call it pierce the corporate veil, but you're not following the corporate formalities, so you don't get the limited liability. Or IRS just says, let me get my compliance binder. To me, that's just like the first punch of the IRS is like, okay, they have a compliance binder. And believe me, I think it does. It's funny, a little side note, when I teach my contract class, I tell them, my job is to have it where you make pretty contracts. And get the strangest looks from my class. Yes, you have to have pretty contracts. She goes, why? And I said, because a pretty contract that looks really good and organized, it shows you that you are a true professional. Same thing with if I'm going to do LLC work, even the big companies, when the big law firms, when you do an LLC, they give us a big binder. The problem is I've been redoing those a lot lately. All it was is you had your bylaws and things like that and a bunch of extra paper, like if you wanted to issue new shares, but there wasn't anything beyond, I created your company. If that's all I could offer, then say, yeah, go to LegalZoom and get your LLC done, because why would you pay $1,200 when you could go and pay $100 or something to Zoom and do that? And so that's why I say, what's the value add? And the main thing is I want to demystify when you build these, what are you getting into? And there may be other phases. And so the ideal situation is I can work with their CPA or their tax strategist and them together so that we can form something that's more tax efficient for them. Because there's a lot of people that waste a lot of tax dollars because they just don't know what they don't know, or they jump to an S corporation before they should, and they're paying for all this payroll services and everything to do that, and then they're not making enough money to make an S corp worth it. And so again, it's that demystification of the process. And that's what I like to do.
Over the course of kind of the consulting process with the clients that we serve, often tell folks that the first people they should start hiring once they get going is a good attorney and a good accountant.
Yes. And I would even say, against my own interest, accountant's probably the first step. Now, you got to also be careful accountants get really busy and they're not always into the tax strategies. And their thing is they may just say, hey, by the numbers, you should be an S Corp. And they're not thinking about all the other stuff that goes with that. And I don't say they're incompetent. I'm just saying they're so busy taking care of so many clients. And it's not typically their job to be advising them on business organization. Like I say, the second part is get that lawyer.
Yeah. Not part of that strategy.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm doing things like this podcast and stuff is to spread the gospel. There's an easy way around it, but I told my dentist he goes, well, I never really I got the binder, but I never really understood it. And I'm talking about and I says, that's wrong. There's nothing. And when I gave him the binder, I says, if there's anything in that binder you don't understand, you call me. It doesn't cost you a dime. Because if it wasn't clear in the binder, then I did something wrong. Right. So call me and let me explain because I need them armed with it, because I'm not always going to be there to hold their hand to keep them in compliance. And I want my clients to be in compliance 100% of the time.
And feel good about it.
Oh, yes. And I want that relationship. So again, they're going to tell their friend, who's going to tell their friend, who's going to tell their friend. And I'd rather do it that way. That's way fees don't drive me. The other advantage of being kind of an old guy like I am is I'm doing this because I love to do it. I'm not putting food on the table. I'm not paying the mortgage. I'm doing it because of just my pure love for it. So money's not driving me. Making people happy and complete and competent, that's what makes me happy.
It sounds like you're doing it the right way, for sure.
I hope so. I haven't had any complaints yet.
Yeah.
The Startup Junkies podcast is brought to you in part by Arise. Arise helps Arkansas tech and tech-enabled startups grow with no-cost coaching, capital navigation, and expert connections so founders can scale faster. Learn more at arisearkansas.org.
So you give this big old compliance binder.
Yes.
I don't want you to spill all your secret sauce, but what's one thing every founder should know about compliance?
The main thing is most of the times they do it, they go to a limited liability company for two reasons. One is that it's called limited liability. They want to they want to make sure that if something really goes wrong, that it's isolated to that entity and it doesn't follow into their personal asset. The second thing is they don't want the IRS to be bugging them or trying to audit them. And there's certain audit traps you get. And one thing is, if you go to the S corporation, the biggest audit trap is you have to determine a reasonable salary. So that way, anything above that is not subject to self-employment tax. Well, most people do the S corporation, they never do the reasonable. And it's not that hard. You just got to say, okay, if something was wrong with you and you had to go hire somebody to take your place, what would you pay them? And that would be, sometimes I've heard people say, well, take 30% of your profits. That's wrong. The IRS doesn't want there's no formula. And so I says, and then what you do is, and I give them in my compliance binder how to do that. And then I says, do it and put it in the binder. Now, what's good is the IRS may not agree with you. But the good thing about the IRS, if they don't agree with you, but they show that you in good faith try to comply, typically interest and penalties are not assessed because you were trying to comply in good faith. And they just may say, I don't know if I agree with that. It's too low, but they go easier on you when you're compliant. So that's the biggest thing. And then the whole list is you've got to keep your personal assets from your business assets. Everything's you can't commingle. It's got to be all separate. And so by the binder, it just reminds them you have to have, and by the way, my own experience of just forming my own law firm, one of the questions you said you may be is this, what's the challenges of even owning your own law firm? And I had to practice what I preach is because, my gosh, I had to go down to the bank. Not only did I have to open up a bank account, I had to open up what's called an IOLTA account, which is a trust account. If I receive any funds that, like on the flat fees, that I haven't earned yet, it can't go into my regular checking account. It has to go into a trust account until I've earned it. Then it goes. And what's nice about the IOLTA account, any interest on there goes to a charity of the Arkansas Bar Association or whatever. But if you're doing it right, all those unearned fees have to go there first. Then once you do the work, you can transfer it over. So there's lots of compliance. And then, my gosh, showing my age again, building a website, getting my own email, my Gmail account, getting my own business cards. Finally, I actually had to get a local phone number because nobody would answer a 509 number.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize that an iPhone can have two numbers on it. So I learned that. So what's good is I've gone through the same steps they need to go through is all these different things. I had to have a different debit card, credit card to make sure that all my expenses are going to be there separate from my own. And what's nice is when it comes to tax time, I've got all those credit card statements and bank accounts that will tell me what my expenses are. So I am living what they're having to live in a small way.
But it's an interesting perspective because in your approach to, teaching contract law at the university, these are things that you've learned by experience living that, and now you're also living this experience that you're also sharing with,
exactly,
clients in a different setting.
The number one thing my students love is my war stories. I've got a million of them. And we'll be talking about something, and I says, oh, let me tell you about the time when this came up. And they like it because you're living the real thing. And the other thing is, like I say, now, if they're struggling or says, oh, gosh, did I struggle too? And here's what I learned. The biggest thing right now, as you know, with attorneys, we could generate some fees. And I'm looking for a payment thing other than them writing a check. And the trouble with that is most of them are charging like 3 and 3.5%. Well, if you take 3 and 3.5% of a legal bill, you're talking about some major dollars. And I don't want to pass that on to the clients because that's just that much more in addition to mine. So right now, I'm still the old fashioned, I send an invoice and they send me a check. I would love to do it better than that. But the problem is I'm worried about cost. And I don't want to chase a client away over $300 in fees because they paid electronically.
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to hear one of your war stories. You don't have to name drop anybody.
Gosh, I'm just trying to, of course, I tell you, a million stories. I'm trying to think would be, I've got a real compelling one, but for a podcast, it wouldn't be good because it was the first industrial accident that I suffered. And it was like a week into a job as a general counsel. I guess
tell it.
It was one of the most devastating things that ever happened to me. I went to work for a timber company in El Dorado, and they ran a bunch of sawmills and stuff like that. And about a week into the job, the boss comes in and he says, "We've had a death." And what had happened is in sawmills, they have things called chip mills, and what they do is all that when you're sawing up wood, you get all those wood chips and stuff like that. Well, they go into a chip bin and they actually sell all that stuff to the paper mills. And this guy had a hard hat, and it fell into the chip bin. And the problem is he went after it, and the auger in the top caught his jacket, and the rest. That's not even the hard part. So we had to go through an OSHA investigation. And then finally, and I had to keep putting off the wife. She just wanted to know what happened and stuff. And finally I says, once the investigation's over with, I could do that. So I went into and I told her. And when I told her what happened, she goes, I can't believe him in that hard hat. I mean, she was really hard on her husband for that, but she was crying. I was crying. I mean, it was horrible, but the company took care of her. She had a life insurance policy and all that. But that's just it, is when you're working in-house, unlike outside, you live that stuff and you live the non-compliance. He lost his life over a hard hat. And that's why I try to say, and when you talk about compliance, as I said, all he had to do was go lock it. He'd got in trouble, but still, he could have locked out and tagged out that machine and then gone and got his hard hat, but he didn't do that. And it stayed with me, and that's probably been 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. And it was just horrible. There's much.
Do you have any positive war stories?
No, I'm trying to think.
Nothing positive in war.
No, the thing is, I'll give you another one that's more positive. Is I teach my class of negotiations because I had one student come up and says, I don't know if I'll ever be a good contract negotiator because I'm a people pleaser. And I says, there's a way around that. And she goes, what? I said, it's easy. And the way I try to teach them, if you know in a contract what each provision means, and you know why it's in there. Most of it's risk management, risk reduction. As long as you know that, and I says, I have it in there because I'm trying to reduce this risk. And if the other side's even being really bad about it, says, look, I'm sorry to upset you and stuff, but really, this has to be in to protect my client from this. Now, if you have another way that can still protect my client and meet, what are your needs? And so once I say, well, you break, a lot of times I have these real huffy, puffy guys. And let me tell you, I've negotiated around the world. I have negotiated against the Germans and the Canadians and all that. Germans were the toughest. But I dug in. But the thing about it is what I learned later is if you have that reason, it never becomes personal. You just say, well, listen, I know why I want it out. Why do you want it in? And a lot of times they don't know. They just want to argue. And you can really displace them. And really to the latter of my career, once I started that, I never lost a negotiation because I knew why I needed my stuff. And then what happens is when you go to the business people, if you can't get a deal done, you're looking reasonable. They're not looking reasonable. And then usually they'll end up overruling their attorney. And so that's why I try to teach. So even you can use that even in a non-legal context. If you're negotiating rent or whatever, all you've got to do is be clear about what you're trying to protect yourself against. Is it better, sir, that I pay $1,100 a month versus $1,500? Because if I had $1,100, I'm going to be in here longer, and you're not going to have to replace me as a tenant, which costs you no telling how much. Is why not give me just a little break in the front end, and then I'll make it worth your while later if I'm more successful in my business. And there's lots of ways of doing that.
Yeah. I wish I would have known about 2 months ago before I signed a contract extension at my apartment.
And that's why you just have to understand the relative thing. And so my whole job has been, let's demystify the law. And I says, now after 30-something years, I can demystify the law. There's not much that I can't just break down and say, this is what it just truly means.
Yeah. Well, I love that. If we have any founders listening, people in the early stage, what's one big thing you could demystify right now?
I'd say... let me think about that. That's a tough question on deep.
Well, you've already given us so much. So
no, it is. Usually I use it by example. That's the hardest part, is because I think just like the dentist I was telling you that he didn't understand his corporate documents, and he didn't understand why this operating agreement had to be a certain way if you're an S corporation. And so I broke it down between the difference between partnership law and corporate law and stuff like that. And I says, that's what they're looking for. They're not trying to be mean and try to catch you and stuff. But if you're an LLC and you have a partner, that's treated like a partnership. Once you go to an S corporation, you're treated like a regular corporation. And so the operating agreement needs to reflect that, because there's certain tax things that are in there. So that's why I try to break that down. As I told you before we started, is I'm starting to get into real estate investment because there's so many tax traps in there. And it has to do with, are you a regular dealer of real estate or just a long-time investor? The tax treatment is completely different.
What's the biggest mistake folks make in regards to contract law?
I think what they do is they're penny wise and they're pound foolish, is they try to cut costs, like not coming to the attorney, and they try to do it themselves. Every client, just about every client, other than two, didn't go to client. You can tell they got it off the internet. What they got off the internet was, crap. I'm not trying to point out. A funny story is, I did have a company do my first PLLC when I had my law firm. They cited the wrong Arkansas law. And you know what's bad? I didn't catch it. And I did later, because when I had my law firm and then I shut it down, then I brought it back and I looked at it and go, oh my gosh, that's the wrong law and stuff like that. So the thing about it is sometimes you do have to invest in money up front to get the quality that you need. But again, you have to have the trust. So what I try to do is tell them, that's why I have that free conferences that said, look, I can help you. And what I'll do is I have an example binder I show them. So this is what you're going to get. And I said, and this is why I think it's more important than what you get on the internet. And I said, and the good thing is when the deal is over with, you can find me. I'm going to be there. I'm just a phone call away. If you're not sure about this, that, or whatever, just call me. I'll get you straight on it. And so that relationship, like you said earlier, begins.
I would say there's probably a lot of value in pursuing and establishing those relationships before you need them, potentially too.
Yes.
In a lot of different areas, but with an attorney, I'm sure.
Yeah, I pass my card out to everybody, but it's because they say, I don't have a current need. But then all of a sudden they go, just like the guy that put my Christmas lights up, I talked to him, and maybe 3 months later he came and called me and says, I need your help. Because I'd made that. And that's why I say these, like you say, when you have these events and these getting together, it's worth getting your name out. That's what I'm trying to do, is get my name out, is that I'm just that different breed of attorney that they haven't seen before. I consider myself very unique. I don't know if you call me a unicorn or what.
We'll call you a unicorn.
Okay, we'll call you a unicorn. Okay. But it's just that I'm trying to bring a new way of delivering legal services. You got to understand on the dynamics of it. The large law firms, and I came from a large law firm. That's where I grew up. They are doing such big deals. They have big clients that pay big money. They will say they'll be your attorney for small, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't have the time. It's not that they're not good lawyers; they just don't have the time because they're making sure the banks and the insurance defense, the insurance companies and all that are satisfied. So then you go to the other spectrum of the smaller firms, but typically they're running wills, divorces, criminal matters, litigation, and litigation is a time-consuming thing. I began as a litigator, and it is. So when you think about business organizations, do they really have the time to spend on it? So there's nobody out there that I know of that just specializes in business organizations and contracts and fractional general counsel. That's why I think I'm kind of that unicorn, is because that's all I do. If they have litigation, I know where to send it. If they have real complex deal structure, I know where to send it. If they have real complex estate planning, I know where to send that too. And it's not going to be me. I know my lane. And I'm very uncomfortable when I get outside my lane. I won't do it. Won't take the chance. Even though I'm thinking about getting into the lien law.
Well, and too, as a prospective client, having that relationship established with the attorney is something that you might not think you need right now until you do. And then it's like, oh crap, like, where do I turn? Who do I call?
And that's why I have the free consultation, is because I want to at least point them in the right direction, even at no cost. Because if I've done that, I've done a good thing. Again, most of my motivation is giving back. I believe that your legacy, when you're no longer here, is not how much money you made or how successful you were as an attorney, but the people that you touched. And there's lots of ways, we can talk about that. My wife does food pantry. She feeds the poor. She touches people in a very big way, and they're hungry and she's bringing them food. I wish I could be that effective. But if I can point somebody in the right direction and keep them from maybe walking into a pothole that they could have avoided, then I've done something right.
That's success for you.
It is success for me.
And I think its impact too is just not that it doesn't have the same tangible nature. It's more ambiguous, but it's still very impactful. Obviously, yeah.
And there's a lot of times at the beginning, I can just say, don't be too, basically what I tell them, don't be too quick to go to an S corporation, because I'll ask them, do you have an LLC? Yes. Have you made the S corp election yet? And usually if they say no, then I'll say why. And that I know what the why is, but I'm making sure that they understand what the why is. And stuff like that. So that's why I'm constantly doing that and giving out what you'd consider maybe free advice, but maybe it's a great marketing employee, but I feel better for it because at least I know I've left them going in the right direction.
Yeah. And so for folks that kind of are waiting for something to happen to reach out to an attorney, why are they scared? Why are folks scared to start that relationship?
I'm glad you asked that question, is because I see it all the time and I can tell you the attorneys are guilty of it, is because what's happened is they've either seen or been involved with going to a law firm that has just absolutely overcharged them. This is my experience. And I dealt with it when I was general counsel, is they go and all of a sudden they've got a legal bill for $5,000. And they go, what? Or
what did I get for this?
And what did I get for this? And the second thing is it wasn't so much, but they got it and they look at it and go, this doesn't look very good. The quality, it's typos and it doesn't even look pretty. Like I told you about contracts. And so you get those two extremes. And the trouble is, and most of the times I can just tell you, if they had 10 things they had to pay for and they could get by with one, the lawyer would be the first one they would cut on spending the money for the lawyer. They would do anything but that. And it's just, lawyers, I hate to say, are just not always looked upon very fondly in this society. Lots of the lawyer jokes and things like that but the lawyers did it to themselves.
Right.
And that includes me. I'm part of that fraternity or sorority or however organization you want to call it. But the thing about it is we did it to ourselves. And so there wasn't enough lawyers that were accessible and helped them out. I really believe the old country lawyers in the small towns are the better practitioners because they live and eat with these folks. And so they have to be perfect as an attorney. They're, if you think about To Kill the Mockingbird, he's the epitome of the country lawyer and stuff. And I think sometimes you get away from that. And so I'm trying to bust that. And so what I can do is, if somebody says, go use Phil because I used him and man, he did everything I needed him to do. I didn't think his bills were unreasonable, but the main thing is he helped me get through the tough areas.
He's a unicorn.
Yeah, he's a unicorn. And he was always accessible. He picks up his phone and I don't feel like he's trying to rush off the phone.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that opinion of attorneys here at Startup Junkie. At least I hope we don't. So we've got a lot of good attorney friends that,
Well, they've partnered with you for a good reason.
Yeah.
And that's why I reached out to you guys. I was looking for those opportunities, and I certainly had heard of you guys. And finally, I looked on your website, and you said you're looking for partners. I says, I can do that.
Yeah. My aunt's an attorney, too. I like her.
Well, it seems like you're doing business the right way. You're giving a bunch of education and, like you said, kind of free advice out to people. I'm going to ask you to give a piece of advice to a younger version of Phil. If you can go back in a time machine any point in your life, give a piece of advice to yourself.
I was ready for that one. Actually, I got two.
Okay.
The first one is be patient. I am the most impatient person. When I look on my career, there's two ways you can advance in the corporate world. You can stay with one company for 30, 40 years and work your way up through the ranks, or you can work your way up almost in like a zigzag fashion. And that's what I did. Every time I went to a new job, I was always advancing to the next level. And so I did it by moving from company to company. I always think about when I was at Walmart back in 2000 and doing great, but I let a couple of things kind of get to me, and stuff. And so finally, when Home Depot came to calling, I went. And I always thought, what if I stayed? And I think patience would just say is just because things may be bad doesn't mean you need to bail and run, is just work the problem and get through it. And I think because sometimes you may find yourself looking and say, man, I wish I would have stayed there and done that. And the second thing, I always look at my little cheat sheet, is make sure you're doing what you like. Because the thing about it is, if you're in a miserable job that you hate and the stress goes on, it's just a bad situation. But if you're doing something you like I do, and just something bad happens, you can get through it better because you just love what you're doing. And those are the two things I would tell I'd go back 25 years and slap myself around and tell those two things.
Yeah.
Be patient. And if you don't like what you're doing, then go somewhere else and to where you want to like it. Yeah. I didn't want to be a lawyer, by the way. I came from a legal family. My dad was a judge. My brother's a judge. And actually, my son is going to be a judge in a year here in Benton County.
That's awesome.
And he did not draw an opponent, thank goodness. And the thing about it is the last thing I wanted to do was be a lawyer. I wanted to be a doctor. But I went to college and completely organic chemistry got the best of me. And so that was it. And so I went back, and actually I ended up being my brother still hates me to this day because I didn't want to go to law school, and I went through law school and had a little bit easier time than he did. It just came to me naturally.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you like what you do now.
I absolutely love what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Well, if any of our listeners want to learn more about you or more about your law office, where should they go?
I think the first thing is go to my website. I have a website.
Yeah.
So it's www.papeseklaw.com.
Right.
And my email is easier because it's phil@papeseklaw.com. And so what's nice is I really talk about, I have my flat fees, I talk about what I do and my little bio and stuff like that. So that's the easiest way. And that's got all my contact information.
Sweet. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes when the episode comes out. Well, Phil, thank you so much for joining us
Really
today.
appreciate it.
Hey, this is great. I hope to do more. I know we're planning to do some more, and I can't wait to the next thing we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're super excited. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share with a friend. Subscribe and review because it matters to us and we want to hear from you. If you're interested in learning how to work with us, check out the information below. See you next week.